Okay. So, it is my pleasure to be here once again teaching Jewish mysticism lessons in Tanya. We are holding chapter 7, which is also our lesson 7, titled Negative Energy. We are reaching the end of our 8-week series.
What page? 140. Oh, maybe I jumped.
Well, not yet. We're not getting there yet. We're not going to go inside the book yet. As I was saying, we are reaching the end of our 8-week series, and it is now an opportune moment for me to explain to you what we're going to do from now until the end. So just sort of give you the summary now that we've done 6 lessons already, and you can give yourselves all a pat on the back for being so consistent, everybody being here every week, or if they couldn't make it, messaging me they can't make it, but they'll watch the video. I thank you all for your consistency. And basically, what we've done up until now, right, is we've said we'd like to understand our spiritual makeup. And so we've introduced the concept in chapter 1, we introduced the concept that there are 2 souls, the godly soul and the animal soul. Right? Pardon me if this is a little bit exhaustive. I know that we've reviewed a few times, but I just want to give you the full picture of what's going on here. In the next 3 chapters, right, so chapters 2, 3, and 4, and 5, I apologize, in the next 4 chapters, we spoke about the godly soul, right? So we spoke about the godly soul, how the godly soul has 10 powers, 3 garments, thought, speech, and action, how we use these powers and garments to interact with the world. We spoke about how we can use those abilities that the godly soul possesses to connect with God and to unite with God, to become one with God on a level that, you know, is only possible if we have a piece of God within us. In other words, to become one with, to get in touch with our real selves, with our godly selves, and in such a way become one with God. We spoke about the difference between studying Torah and doing mitzvos, all under the context of these 4 chapters of analyzing the godly soul. Right? In the following 2 chapters, in the following 3 chapters, chapters 6, 7, and 8, of which today we are 7, right? So in the beginning of chapter 6, we started off, right? The title was Your Darker Side. I remember some people were like, wow, we're going to talk about the darker side, right? In other words, we're going to talk about the animal soul. We introduced the animal soul. What drives the animal soul? What is the source of the animal soul? And now, in today's chapter, titled Negative Energy, in next week's chapter, titled Negative Energy, Part 2, we are going to talk about some of the effects that the animal soul has upon us. Okay? And with that, we will conclude our 8-week series. This has nothing to do with the way the Alter Rebbe split the Tanya. The Alter Rebbe split the Tanya only by chapters, 53 of them in total. But this will conclude the first 8-chapter series in which we will have discussed our spiritual makeup. Right? Now, obviously there are a lot of ramifications to that. And then in the next 8-chapter series, we are going to talk about the fight. Right? So we'll talk about the war. In fact, chapter 9 is already titled right away. Where is it? The war inside you, right? And from there we'll move on to begin to discuss what levels a person can reach, and we'll touch back on the questions we asked in the first chapter. Once we reach chapter 12, we'll get to some of the questions we asked in the first chapter with regards to, can a person ever be a tzaddik? Can a person ever be a Benoni, right? A Benoni being the in-betweener. Remember, this book is called the Book of In-Betweeners. And how we can achieve these levels, etc. Right? So we're going to talk a little bit about the fight, the war, the day-to-day struggle we each have between these 2 souls, now that we'll have a full and proper understanding of what our spiritual makeup is. That 8-week series will begin a little bit later. I don't have exact dates for them yet. To be honest, I'm waiting for a little bit of personal things in my personal life to fall into place. Once they do, we'll figure out when I can commit to that 8-week series. We hope to do it before Pesach. That's the goal. To do that second 8-week series before Pesach. That will be an additional $79, and there will be a discount for those that are coming along from the first class to the second, from the first series to the second series. I haven't crunched the numbers yet, but probably would be something about $20 off if you're coming along with us to the second series, which I highly encourage you do. I think almost everybody here lives in Pasadena and can attend, and I hope you'll be with us for all 53 chapters. But at least to carry on with us from the first 8-week series to the second 8-week series, because just understanding who we are doesn't help us actually change ourselves. And that's what we discuss in the second series of 8 chapters. Okay?
Some of us are going to be in Israel, so we should get more of a discount.
Well, that's not true. That just means that you should make sure you're on top of your game and watch all the YouTube videos. No excuses in this class, my friend. Everything is recorded.
Okay.
All right.
Appreciate get the frequent buyer discount.
Right. All right. So we are on page 92 is the page. Chapter 7, negative energy. And we're going to do section 1, kosher pleasures. Section 2, forbidden pleasures. And section 3, a very interesting section, which will talk about the special power of the bedtime Shema. Okay, so we're on page 92 in our books, and in handout number 7, chapter 7, negative energy, we will begin in just a moment. Yes, Irit?
It's a question, because I listened to the last class,
Okay.
and something bothered me.
Oh.
We say that
If there's any goal of Tanya, is to make things bother you. Right? We go about our lives just fine before Tanya. All of a sudden we learn Tanya and now everything bothers us. Right? I'm not such a good person. Maybe I should work a little bit more on myself.
Not that.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
About God creating good and evil. I don't see how God can create evil.
Very good, okay.
If God made everything that was made and declared it was very good, He couldn't have made evil. So could it be that evil is a separate power from God, and what God created in us is to be tempted by evil or to reject evil? Not to give it real power, that it's really an entity, but that's like a suggestion in our mind, like do this, or believe this, don't believe that. Because I can't see how God could create evil.
Very good, okay. So just to summarize Irit's question and to mention it for those that are watching online, the question is, how is it possible for God to have created evil? Right? Why? Because it doesn't make sense. If God said that everything in this world is good, she's referring to a verse from Bereshit, where Hashem says, V'hinei tov me'od, that everything that He had created, God looked around at His creations after He had finished creating everything, V'hinei tov me'od, and everything that God had created was very good. Right? And so her question is, therefore, I wrestle with the fact that God could have created evil, and therefore her suggestion is that maybe evil is not godly created, heaven forbid, and it's a separate entity from God, and it's not inside of us, and it's something that tempts us always, and we have to choose, obviously, good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll start with what are the sort of the biblical sources, or the Jewish belief sources for why what our problem is with saying that. Now, this doesn't make the wrestle or the question any less. Your question is a very good question, but I want to explain to you why your solution is not such a good solution. Because your solution is predicated on the fact that there is something that exists in this world other than God.
It doesn't exist. It has no reality. It's like a trick. It's like mesmerism.
Oh, so it's an illusion.
It's
Okay.
illusion.
So you're getting a little closer, but I want to make one thing very clear. According to Jewish belief, particularly the way Hasidus explains it, it is not possible for there to be something else in this world that exists that's apart from God. Right? When God says, Lo yeh lecha elokim achirim al panai, the second of the 10 commandments, that you should not have any other gods other than myself, right? God is not just referring to any other entity that we worship, which obviously we believe in monotheism, we believe in one God, etc. But God is also saying that we cannot believe that anything that exists in this world is in any way not godly, was not preordained by God, was not Does that make sense? And now, there's a lot of times in life that we wrestle with this, right? Holocaust survivors, right? Not even just Holocaust survivors. Us as Jews today, coming from International Holocaust Remembrance Day, right? So that's something we struggle with, right? How can God have created? But we have to figure out a way that God also created the Holocaust, right? And God also created everything in this world. Now, this doesn't mean we have to accept it, right? Just as when God does something negative to us, that doesn't mean, right? Baruch Hashem, we're all very good at not accepting when God does something negative to us, right? We scream out to God, why did you do this to me, right? Tevye style. You created many poor men, many rich men, many poor men. How does he say? I can't believe it. I can't quote it anymore.
Yeah.
But what would it have spoiled some vast eternal plan if you would have given me a small fortune, right? We're very good at screaming at God about the little things in our lives that bother us, right? But technically we should not be satisfied either meaning we don't have to be satisfied by creation. That's not our job. So the fact that tragedy happens in this world, right? Let's not even talk about the Holocaust. Let's talk about, little tragedies in our lives. We all know people that suffered. They had a child that was, passed away at the tender age of whatever, 3, 10, whatever it is, right? And before the child even got to live properly, right? So why does God create those scenarios, right? What? One second. And all sorts of things like that. Now, so it's important to understand that an important core principle, core guiding logic that we have is that God created the world and everything. God created everything that there is inside this world. So there isn't like, a little nook, a little cranny, a little something that wasn't created by God. Okay? So what Tanya explains is that God did create, and here's where I'm going to answer your question. God created unholiness. What does that mean? God created the ability to be unholy. Now, you used the word evil, and I think because you used the word evil, that might be part of why you struggle. Because evil means that something is inherently bad, right? And God says clearly that everything in this world is tov mod, is very good, right? I'm not sure, you told me you watched last week's class. I'm not sure if it was in last week's class or the week before, that we spoke about how the Talmud says that when Mashiach will come, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, our desire, the power in us that tells us to do things that are no good, which we call the evil inclination, right, will come to us, and we'll say, Zushi, why did you do so-and-so? And I'll say, what do you mean, why did you do so-and-so? You told me to do it, right? And then he'll look at you and say, yeah, I told you to do it because I was doing my job. But your job was supposed to be to overcome that desire to do that, overcome that inclination to do that, and as such, bring about an unbelievable godliness into the world, right? The fact that you had the choice, we spoke about this last week, right? The power of the choice of good and evil, and as a result, by choosing good, right? By ending that choice, by choosing good, bring about an unbelievable godly unity into this world, right? So, to answer your question, when it says that God created the entire world, Zehine Tov Mod, and everything was very good, it's referring also to evil. It's referring also to, let's use the words of Tanya, to Kelipa, right? Remember, Tanya never uses the word, what would be the word for evil in Hebrew? Not Ra. Ra is bad. Resha, right? It never says that God created Resha. Yeah. Tanya talks about Kelipa, right? And if you remember back all the way to the beginning when we introduced Kelipa the first time, what's the English translation of the Hebrew word Kelipa? Shell, right? And what's the difference between calling something a shell or calling something, destructive? That a shell is there, and it's actually there to protect the fruit. It's there, it's supposed to be there, it serves a role. The role is to be ignored.
Shell is klipa, meaning it's not part of us. It could be a...
One second. I want to stress the more important factor about shell. The more important factor about it is that it's there, and it serves a purpose. Making it v'hinei tov ma'od, it's very good. Right? But its purpose is to be ignored. Kelipa serves a purpose in this world. Let nobody tell you that Kelipa doesn't serve a purpose in this world. However, not just that, we spoke last week about how Kelipa is created from God. This Kelipa, which contradicts God's will at every point, right? It was created by God in a way that it's behind its back, right? Like someone who passes something to his enemy, it's almost undesirable, but it's created. God wants to create it, right? And why is that? Because what is the role of Kelipa? The role of Kelipa is to, just like the shell or the peel that covers over on the fruit, the role of Kelipa is to cover over ungodliness. Right? Now, is Kelipa created by God? Yes. But its role in this world, just as a table has a role that it's supposed to hold things on, just as a human being has a role that, he does his things. And a Jew has a role that he's supposed to choose between good and evil. Right? The Kelipa has its role, and that is to cover over on God. We're not done discussing it. For the next 2 chapters, we're still going to be discussing negative energy. But I wanted did I get to what you were saying? So you would be right in saying...
I got it, but I don't like it.
Which part do you not like?
That evil is part of God.
I present to you good and evil.
We have to say that evil is part of God.
It's our choice. Are we taking good or taking evil?
Right, but Irit, remember, if we want to say that the entire world is godliness, right, if we want to say... What are all the psukim from the Zohar? Let the asar panoi minei, that's in Aramaic, that there's no space that's not filled by godliness. Mm-hmm. We have to come to a certain realization that Kelipa, at its source, strip away everything else, right? Just like the table. When I look at the table, maybe you're a little more spiritual than me. Maybe when you look at the table, you see godly energy. But when I look at the table, I see table. I don't see godly energy. I know that when I dig beneath the surface, a table has godly energy in it that creates it. With me, Jeff? Similarly, we have to be able to realize that realization when it comes to Kelipa as well. You understand what I'm saying, Margaret?
Last time we've learned that absence of light is darkness.
Very good, exactly. But we have to begin to realize a realization that even darkness, which is the absence of light, because we believe that everything is godliness, even darkness has to have light in it.
Uh-huh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's where we're struggling here. And it's a bridge between the two. You're right. Does it exist? It does exist. It's godliness, and God wanted it to exist, and God sanctions its existence. But God wants it to exist in a way that we should ignore it.
It's like it existed, but it's not real. We
Okay.
need to prove that it's
We need to prove that it's not real. That's a good thing. Right? 100%. I think it was at the end of last week's lesson that we spoke about.
It's like hypnotism.
Okay, now we're already getting off on a tangent. But I think it was the end of last week's lesson that we spoke about the analogy of a father and a son, and the father hides from the son. Was that at the end of last week's lesson?
Yes.
Right? That's the best example I can give for it. Right? So now you tell me, when the father hides from the son, the father who's playing hide and go seek with the son, right? When he's hiding from him, is the concealment or the hiding, is that real?
No.
Yes and no.
Yes.
To the child, it's the most real thing in the world. He doesn't know that the father doesn't want to hide from the child. But to the father, is it real? That's not real. It's not real. I made it that the child should see concealment, but it's not actually real.
No, I get it. Yeah.
Okay? So I try to always have these discussions as a discussion without getting too hung up on words. Right? That's what I was saying. Like I don't want to use the word evil, because when we use the word evil, people have all sorts of preconceived notions. When we use the word real or existence, whatever, like everybody has their own. The more we talk about it, the more we understand it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right. Without further ado, we begin chapter 7, negative energy, on page 92 in your Tanya, and in the handout, chapter 7, negative energy. Okay. So at the end of last week's lesson, we spoke about how Kelipa, or this shell, or the negative energy that exists in the world, is divided in two. Right? It's really divided in four, but for the purposes of our conversation, it's divided in two. 3 are the deep, completely impure, call them inherently bad Kelipot, right? And one of them is Kelipas Nogah, which means, so that's why they're called Shalosh Kelipot HaTmeot, which means the 3 impure Kelipas, right? And the one is Kelipas Nogah, which means a bright Kelipa. Right? A bright Kelipa refers to the fact that it has a little bit of godliness in it. Right? So it is unholy, but it's brightened by a veiled godliness. In today's lesson, we are going to examine them one at a time. First, Kelipas Nogah, the lower one, the one that we said can be converted, and we're going to talk about a lot of implications that come out as a result of that. That's section 1, kosher pleasures. And then in section 2, we're going to talk about forbidden pleasures, or the Shalosh Kelipos HaTmeos, the 3 impure Kelipos. In other words, the source of all real evil in this world, or real bad in this world. Okay? Okay, so let's start with Kelipas Nogah. So Kelipas Nogah, let's start with its name. Nogah means to be bright. And what this means is, so all 4 Kelipot are unholy. Right? They're clearly not Kedusha. They're clearly not holiness. And the main sort of underlying thought here is, you have to remember in last week the Alter Rebbe introduced this theory, this philosophy, that there is no such thing as a neutral activity. Nothing we do in this world is not good and not bad. Just nothing. Doesn't work that way. It's either holy or it's unholy. Right? Now, as a result, when we get to unholiness, there's going to be two types of unholiness. There's going to be unholiness which brings about something bad in the world, or there's going to be something unholy that brings about, that doesn't necessarily bring about something bad in the world. Now, when you do something and it's unholy, in other words, it doesn't bring about something bad in the world, it doesn't bring about something good in the world, is it Kedusha? Is it holiness? No, it's not holiness. Clearly not. Why? Because it's not imbued by the power of God. It's not infused with godliness. Right? When we put up tefillin, that's infused with godliness the moment we do that. Right? When we drink a cup of water and we make a bracha on it, we make a blessing on it, and we use that, I was going to say energy, but I guess it's not energy, it's hydration, whatever it is, right? To then serve God, that cup of water is holy. Right? That's Kedusha. When you just drink a cup of water, it's automatically unholy. What was the... Do you remember what was this predicated on? It was predicated on the point that Marguerite just reminded us about. That anywhere where there's no light, automatically there's darkness. Right? In other words, this world, every activity in this world, in this universe, is driven by one of two things. Either godliness or ego. right? Meaning when we do something, right? Any activity that we do is either driven by something higher than us, godliness. We want to do something for God, right? In whatever way that is, whether that's out of a love for a spouse, that also can be translated to godliness, etc., right? Or it can be a selfish and completely self-motivated, ego-motivated action. Everybody with me?
Mm-hmm.
But even in an ego-motivated action, there can be something that affects in a negative way, that brings about bad into this world, or it can be something that just, it's about me. It's not godly because God, like we said last week, there's no space for God because it's so full of me. Mm-hmm. But I'm not doing anything bad in the world. This is Kelipas Nogah. Okay? What are some physical things in this world that find their source from Kelipas Nogah? So first of all, there's going to be in us. Right? In us, you'll be surprised to learn that a Jew, there's no part of a Jew that is inherently evil. There is no part of a Jew that comes from Shalosh Kelipos Atmeos. A Jew is made up, obviously, of his godly soul, which finds its source in godliness, correct? But in terms of like the three divisions that we split up the world, there's Kedusha, which is holiness, Shalosh Kelipos Atmeos, which is completely evil, and Kelipas Nogah, which is sort of this middle ground. Right? So where does the godly soul find its source? In holiness. Right? And anything else that's in a Jew comes from the soul, not the soul that's evil, the soul that's unholy. The animalistic soul finds its source in Kelipas Nogah. And we're going to talk in a moment soon, we're going to talk about why. Because even the animalistic soul, we said, right? So everything that comes from the animalistic soul is ego-driven. Right? It's all about us. However, it doesn't have to be something that brings about negativity into the world, something that brings about bad into this world. Right? It could be about self-survival. It could be something just ego-motivated. That's Nefesh HaBahamit. And that's why another name that we call the Nefesh HaBahamit, the animalistic soul, is what? Nefesh HaChayunit. The first words in this chapter are but Nefesh HaChayunit, the energizing soul. Chayut means energy, life. That's what it means, life. So our animalistic soul is also the soul that drives us to stay alive. Survival of the fittest, call it what you will. Right? That's the animalistic soul. So that's one thing that finds its source in Kelipas Nogah. Another two types of things that find their source in Kelipas Nogah are all animals that are kosher and can be eaten. Surprise, surprise. Does not come from holiness, despite the fact that it's kosher. Beef, right? Kosher beef that's been slaughtered kosher and it hasn't been mixed with milk finds its source where? In Kelipas Nogah, in this neutral sense. Why? Because nothing has been proven yet, and we're going to talk about it in a moment. In the two examples, we'll talk about this more. Really, we'll get nitty-gritty with this, and we'll really practicalize it. And then there's edible kosher plants as another example. There's lots of things that can be brought as an example, but edible kosher plants can also be brought as an example, right? So any living vegetable, fruit or vegetable we can eat. Again, they're kosher, completely fine for us to go ahead and eat them. We're calling them, look at the beginning of the lesson, kosher pleasures. They're pleasures that are allowed, right? But they're not necessarily holy. Are we all on the same page?
Are these fruits holy because they're here for Tu B'Shvat?
Not until we see what becomes of them. Okay. That's what we're getting right here.
Okay.
They eventually become.
Okay, now, so why are they from Kelipas Nogah? Right, if they're completely allowed, if we're talking about something that's completely kosher, it's meat, it was slaughtered properly, right? It was, I don't know, there was a Jew watching it from the moment it was born until the moment it entered my mouth, and it's completely kosher, no meat and milk touched, it's been slaughtered by a kosher slaughterer, all the top, glatt, kosher meat. Why is it not, so if I'm allowed to eat it, why is its source not holiness? Why is that? Because in order for the source of something to be holiness, there has to be an energy of godliness in it that we brought down into that thing. So when we put on tefillin, the tefillin are holy. Why? Because we're bringing down godliness into the tefillin. Right? When we eat meat, that's not necessarily the case. At least not yet. We don't know. Right? So if a simple kosher act, we're in bullet point number 4, if a simple kosher act such as eating kosher is devoid of godly intent, it is unholy. Comparable to an act driven by the animalistic soul. I must have deleted a couple words here. But the point here is, the point we're making here is that any act that a person does, if devoid of any godly, right? Marguerite, how did you put it from last week? If it's devoid of any light, if it's devoid of any godliness, then it's automatically darkness. It's automatically unholy. Why? Because if it's not driven by godliness, if it's not infused by God, if we didn't make that choice of infusing with godliness, then it's automatically infused with the animalistic soul, or in other words, driven by our ego. Okay? Now, so the summation of it all is that anything that finds its source in Kelipas Nogah, which is, by the way, a lot of things in this world, right? Anything that finds its source in Kelipas Nogah is a flexible intermediary. Sometimes it gets absorbed. So it goes sort of back and forth. It's constantly fluctuating. Sometimes it gets absorbed by the three impure, right? By the shalosh klipas tomatoes all the way to the evil. And sometimes it gets absorbed in Kedusha. So Kelipas Nogah has a lot of potential, I guess we would call it. Let's call it very powerful, but we're not sure powerful what yet. Naturally, if a person does nothing to it, it'll stay powerfully impure. Why? Because you've now chosen to take this thing and use it for something that's inherently not inherently, but something that's not godly. Right? If you take it and use it for godliness, then it's godly. Okay, and then it gets absorbed in Kedusha and holiness. Okay, so now let's get to some examples. Okay, so these examples are a lot of fun. The Alter Rebbe actually brings them. He brings them from the Talmud, each one of them from the Talmud, and each one with its own examples, with its own ramifications, I guess I should call it. Right? So the first example is eating meat and kosher wine. Right? So the Alter Rebbe goes on at length. Where is it? On page 95. Kigon. For example, right, the third paragraph. For example, eating marbled meat and fragrant wine to broaden your minds for God and His Torah. Or if you enjoy food and drink to fulfill the mitzvah of taking pleasure on the Shabbos and festivals, then the meat and wine Kelipas Nogah energy is refined. And it ascends to God like a burnt offering and like a sacrifice. In other words, you've chosen to eat this meat and drink this wine for a good purpose. Right? That's the good side. Another example. Similarly, famously, Rabbah was known for being a jokester. He was known for being a very humorous rabbi. As a matter of fact, every time he would start a class, he would sit around with the greatest rabbis of his generation and he would teach them Torah. He would begin with a joke. And all the rabbis would laugh.
How nice.
But then the Talmud continues that then they would start to study Torah, and it would be with trembling fear, as if they had just received it from Sinai. So what was the point of the joke? If that's the mode you're trying to get into, if you're trying to get into a mode where you want to tremble from fear of Torah and the seriousness of Torah and the intensity of Torah, right, as if you just received it from God Himself, so why are you telling a joke? Isn't that very inappropriate? The Rashi and the different commentators on the spot over there explain that the point here is that Rabbah was out to use a joke, which is inherently something from Kelipas Nogah, in its most positive way. What's he doing? When one tells a joke, right? Let's read it inside in the Alter Rebbe's words. Another example is the use of humor to sharpen your mind and to put you in a joyous mood for God, His Torah, and His worship, which ought to be carried out joyously, as Rava did with his students when he commenced with a humorous remark to them, and the students would become cheerful. Right? In other words, he was using this joke, which could be used just to pass the time and whittle away and to be an empty person and a frivolous person. Instead, he used this joke to do something to the minds of the rabbis. Right? We all know. This is why I thought today every rabbi starts any good rabbi starts his sermon with a joke, right? We all know that the moment, right, when you're sitting in a room and a whole bunch of people are sitting, it's a very tense atmosphere. People don't want to listen to a sermon. They're like a little bit uncomfortable. Then the person who's giving the sermon tells a joke. The moment that he tells a joke, what happens? Everybody relaxes. Not just their bodies, but also their minds. Our minds open up. We're much more willing to listen to other people, right? In our minds, we're very tense, we're very busy, we have so much going on. The moment that a joke is told,
breaks the tension.
It breaks the tension, it eases. It's like doing acupuncture. It eases, right? That's the point. No, you press certain pressure points, and it eases the muscles in the body. You read as an acupuncturist, is that the word? Similarly in our minds, this is acupuncture for the mind. We tell a joke. The moment you tell a joke,
Stimulate.
it releases the tension and the muscles of the mind relax and we're able to listen. So Rabba, back to our scenario, used a joke which is inherently sourced in Kelipas Nogah and could have gone either way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he used it for the right thing. Now, in both of these instances, we're now on the top of page 96. Someone who becomes a meat gorger and guzzles wine, right? And why is he eating? You ask him. You know. By the way, I recently heard of a concept in today's popular culture, which is great. A great way of bringing out this point. I don't remember the term for it. Maybe somebody can remind me. It's something like. Is it binge and purge?
Binging.
No. It's a real pop culture. This is like the teenagers in today's day and age know this term.
Binge watching a TV show?
Not like binge watching a TV show. The concept is that people like to eat, but they don't like to get fat.
Oh.
So they
So
eat,
purge.
so they purge afterwards. So they eat so much, and then they get rid of it. Right? And then they find a way, I don't know if it's with a pill, or I don't know if it's by a certain mechanism, whatever it is, or they eat so much that then they regurgitate it, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. Think about this act. Is the food serving any purpose? No. The food in this realm became what? Just another tool for my ego to express itself. Mm-hmm. I need to have more pleasure in my life. I need to be able to enjoy myself more, so I found another tool through the food to do this. Ask any human being, what is food? What will they tell you? Sustenance. Mm-hmm. Food is to sustain you. Now, obviously, there are foods that we like, foods that we don't like. There's nothing wrong with eating foods that we like. Right? Judaism does not encourage what's the word for it? It always slips my mind. Like hermetism, or going up to the mountains and not eating for days on end and not having intimate relations with other people, etc. Right? Judaism doesn't encourage that. Judaism encourages using our body and engaging in physical activities, but not. I repeat, most important part, not for the sake of the physical activity. Eating is not an activity because it's eating, because it's pleasurable. Eating has to be driven for something. For something, to give us energy, like that we can use that energy to serve God. Right? So back to what we were saying, when somebody eats, well, who asked about these fruits? Right? If somebody eats fruits, and the whole point of eating the fruits is just that because he likes this pleasurable taste, in my mind always I picture like the Romans, the caricatures, you always see the cartoons, you always see the Romans, the way they would sit, what they call like orgies, right? And they would sit around, they would gluttonous, right? And they had the people hanging fruit and more food and more food and more food. This concept, I think, of binge and purge comes, I think, from the Romans.
Yeah, they did that.
They did that, right? Why? Because they worshipped their bodies. It was all about, how can I serve myself more? Right? Now, so back to the point we're trying to make here. So in both of these instances, we see where the activity, or even the item itself, the meat, the wine, right? What can it be used for? Either to binge and purge, right? Or it can be used to honor Shabbos, right? To have special pleasure on Shabbos, like we're told, right? Because God tells us to sanctify the Shabbos. Or on an even more mundane level, just to use it to feel good. And I mean, when we drink wine, it makes us feel better. And then we can do things, if drinking wine helps us, this is not just a little disclaimer, right? Parenthetical disclaimer, I'm not encouraging alcoholism here, right? But if drinking wine helps us, put us more at ease, like that we can learn Torah. Or like that we can, enjoy Shabbos and enjoy the company of other people. And kol hakavod, right? If it helps us with our obviously, so it helps us with serving God, then great. We have now uplifted this wine, which could have gone either way, and absorbed it into kedusha, into holiness. Right?
So everything has to be pre-thought.
Correct. I encourage that in general in life, by the way, not just in terms of this. Yeah. Torah tells us, sof ma'aseh machshava tchila. If you want the end result to be proper, start off with a plan.
Everything starts with a thought.
Everything starts with a thought, right? Even in Tanya, we just discussed this a couple weeks ago. We spoke about how it starts with a thought, it develops into an emotion, from an emotion it develops into an action, right? Or speech, action, whatever it is, right? It starts as chachma, starts as intellect. This mikveh here, You think that the mikveh, little plug for the mikveh, I don't know if anybody noticed, but right outside, they're building the first mikveh in the San Gabriel Valley, in the entire San Gabriel Valley. This will be the first mikveh that women will be able to go to, in the kosher mikveh. Yes, indeed, it's a beautiful thing. We're looking forward to the completion of it, and it still needs a lot of funds in addition to a lot of work. But this mikveh, right? You think any contractor would go into building anything, not just the mikveh, but anything, in any construction, without knowing exactly what he wants the finished product to look like? Now, when's the finished product coming? The mikveh in 6 months. Other things in 5 years, right? A proper development can take 5 years to build up. Right? A stadium, one of these huge productions, It can take 5 years to build. Why does he even know what the end looks like? Let him set a plan for this year. Year number 1. Then he'll set a plan for year number 2. Yes, we have to, because if we don't plan to begin with, if we don't think about what we want as a product at the end, then we won't get, we won't be able to get anything done, or we'll be getting things done but working backwards, right? Because you're constantly taking one step forward but 2 steps backwards. So yes, everything that we do in this world, we have to think about, and we have to think: am I doing this? It eventually becomes a little less pressureful. It's not so, it doesn't have to be so much pressure. We do things, and we do them for a purpose. We learn, we daven, we eat, drink, we sleep, but we do them in order to be able to serve Hashem.
It's like everything we can be doing using a spiritual sense or a physical sense.
Yeah, but even on a physical sense, just figure out a way that physical sense can be godly. You don't have to think about the fact that there's godly energy coming out into this world. You don't have to. 100%. Yeah. Meaning. 100%. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
So eating meat, say the cow. So if we have a meal of that cow here, it elevates the cow.
Right.
Well, what about somebody else that has some of that same meat and they didn't pray, they just ate it?
100%.
So is that what you're saying?
Okay. So here's a really good point. I think you're leading into the next 2 bullet points. The last 2 bullet points discuss, right? This is what we really want to know about, is what happens when you don't do it. What happens when somebody does eat meat purely for the sake of his own pleasure? Or do anything in this world purely for the sake of its own pleasure. Right? So then tells us the Alter Rebbe, during that moment, or moment is not just in time, it's also in space, there's a certain portion of the Jew which is locked in the forces of Kelipa. And from a Kelipa perspective, why is Kelipa doing this? Because that's what Kelipa wants. What did we discuss? Kelipa gets its energy from Kedusha, from holiness. Right? Unholiness gets its energy from holiness. So it needs to suck from holiness somehow. A Jew is its conduit. And when a Jew does something with impure intentions, with non-holy intentions, in that moment, or in that aspect of his life, he has become a conduit. And that's why, by the way, the word we use for these things, we'll talk about it soon, 1 second. He's temporarily a conduit for Kelipa.
Wow.
Okay? Now, the good news is that that's until he does Teshuvah. And to do Teshuvah for something that a person, there was only Kelipas Nogah, there was something that was allowed, meaning to do Teshuvah for eating meat and eating it with the wrong intentions is very easy. When a person realizes that and regrets it, has proper remorse for it, then that, and right, so here we're at the bottom, last bullet point, number 1, until he does Teshuvah. Remorse for that action, at that point the energy is released from the confines of Kelipa to Kedusha because it was never inherently negative.
Okay.
And this is where we get to that point we mentioned much earlier in this lesson, that Kelipas Nogah is flexible. Right? Anything that finds its source in Kelipas Nogah is very flexible. It can move back and forth in an instant. All depending on who? The Jew. What are you going to do with it? Right? Talk about power. Right? This is what we're talking about. When the Torah says, see, I've put before you today the good which is life and the bad which is evil, and the bad which is death. This is what God is talking about. And every moment in our lives we're faced with a choice. What am I going to do with this object? What am I going to do with this energy? What am I going to do with this activity? And should we choose to serve God with it, we have uplifted this mundane item and brought it to the highest level possible. Should we choose to do the opposite with it, it sinks to the lowest levels of Kelipa. Should we do Teshuvah? Should we repent and we realize and regret what we did? Then we uplift it again to holiness. That's Kelipas Nogah. Okay? But there are certain things, we're moving into section 2, there are certain things that's not possible with. There are certain things that God created in this world that there is no way to refine them. There is no way to uplift them. Last week we spoke about the man who tells you, yeah, I'm going to eat pig, I'm going to eat pork, but I'm going to use that energy to serve God. Doesn't work. It doesn't work. Shalosh Kelipas Atmeis, the 3 impure Kelipas are inherently negative. And the way to refine them, God tells us, is by not touching them. By avoiding them. And that's why some things that find their source in the three inherently evil, inherently impure Kelipas, what are they? Evil non-Jewish souls. Right? I think last year 2 years ago, they had that question going on. The New York Times had a question. If you had an opportunity, if you were able to go back in time and see baby Hitler, would you be able to kill? Would you kill him or not kill him? Right? Mm-hmm. There are certain human beings that their source is from Shalosh Kelipas Atmeos. As judgmental and as racist as that sounds, that's the way it is. Not non-Jews. I did not say about non-Jews. There are non-Jews that are good. There are non-Jews that are not. Right? But there are non-Jews. And this is never by a Jew. A Jew can never find his source in Shalosh Kelipas Atmeos, right? Because we said already we're a Jew's source, his souls are from either one from Kelipas Nogah and one from Kedusha, from holiness, right? But a non-Jew, there are non-Jews out in the world that God sends to the world. Everybody in this room should be able to have a couple names offhand that they know, right? That are inherently evil. And that's the way it is. Yes. Why God wanted that? We'll talk about that soon. Like why God that there should be things in this world that are inherently evil and that we cannot even uplift them, right? Yeah. So according to Chassidus, Hitler, Yamach Shemayim, may his name be blotted, his life was destined to be evil. He didn't have any choice over it. Kabbalah doesn't discuss Hitler, but Kabbalah discusses Paro, just as Pharaoh, just as equally evil of a man, right? To take an entire nation, put them into slavery, kill half the nation, right? Sentence them all to death. And there's a big discussion about whether Paro actually had choice in what he did or not. And on a certain level, just because I know that everybody has this philosophical question, how can you judge somebody if they don't have, if they weren't given a choice, etc. On a very basic level, the answer is that at the beginning he had a choice, but after a certain point, and this is clear in the Torah, God says, "I have hardened his heart." Right?
What?
I have hardened his heart. Right?
Yeah.
This is in the past couple parshas. We've been learning about this, right? How God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, "You can go tell Paro to let the Jewish people go." I'm telling you now, he's going to say no. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Where's Paro's freedom of choice? It was gone already. At that point, it was too late. Mm-hmm. At that point, he had entered the realm of Shalosh Kelipas Atmeos. Mm-hmm. Okay, of the 3 inherently impure Kelipas. And there are people like that in this world. Doesn't mean that many, right? They may be few and far between, right? But they exist even in the 21st century. We've heard of them, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Some other simpler, lighter topics that also come from the Shalosh Kelipas Atmeos, from the 3 impure Kelipas. We spoke about pork, right? Any animal that a Jew is not allowed to eat that's not kosher comes from the Shalosh Kelipas Atmeos, from 3 impure Kelipas. And the third is any forbidden plants, right? So without getting very technical here, but there are certain plants that Jews are not allowed to have. There's kilayim, right, which means when two fruits are mixed together by a Jew, whatever, complicated.
Hybrid.
But what?
Hybrid?
Like hybrids, but it has to be done by a Jew, and etc. You're going? We'll see you, no problem. See you next week. Catch the end of the lesson online. In this week's class, you can't see the clock on the video, but you'll figure out from when. Okay. Right. So these things are locked. Let's ask Irit, our Israeli professional expert witness that we have in the class here. What is the Hebrew word for something that's forbidden?
Asur.
Asur. What does the word asur mean in Hebrew?
Forbidden.
No.
Literally. Chain.
Very good. Locked up. Tied up. Right? Every morning we ask, one of the blessings we ask is, Baruch Atah, we thank God. One of the things we thank God for is what? No, later than that. And of all the blessings we make, we say, Matir Asurim. Right? He who releases people from their bondages. In other words, for the ability to walk, that we're not paralyzed. So that's why these items are called asur. Asur meaning forbidden, but asur also means tied up. They are tied up in the three klipos, and it is not in our ability to remove them from there. Our job is just to ignore them. They have to stay there. When will they be released? Anybody care to guess?
Mashiach.
Very good. When Mashiach comes,
Really?
there's a famous verse in the Torah which says, Bila hamavet lanetzach. I will remove, not remove. Bila means will be swallowed up. Death will be swallowed up from the world. And the end of the pasuk is, that's ruach hatuma. This is from Isaiah, obviously, right? Where all the, right? Let's look at it inside. We're in section 2, forbidden pleasures, in the third paragraph. Ad ki yavo yomam, until their day comes. And now he's quoting from Yirmiyah now, from Jeremiah. And death will be swallowed up forever. That's the one that I just quoted to you by heart. And then, as the verse states, I will remove the spirit of impurity from the earth. And that is referring to these shalosh klipos atmeos. To these three impure klipas, God will take care of it. Not our job. Okay? Can we handle that?
Yeah.
Bring it.
All right. All right. Now, there is one caveat, right? So just like last
I
time.
have a question about that.
Yes.
So God will take care of it. Do we know if God says, I'll take care of it because these things don't exist, like pig doesn't exist anymore?
When Mashiach comes? No. No, pig will
It
still exist.
exists, but
But it will no
we can
longer
eat it
be.
again?
Yeah,
They
we'll be
will
able to eat
become
it. We will be able to eat it.
bacon!
There you go. There you go. So Marguerite, you've heard this before, right? When Mashiach comes, we'll be able to eat pig. Why? How does that make sense if it's not?
Pigs will be kosher.
Right. But Marguerite, why? Why? This is the discussion
Because
today's
it will
class.
be total purification.
One second. Why? Because what is Tanya telling us now? The source of it is in Shalosh Klipos Atmeos. It's locked right now in the three Kelipas, which cannot be uplifted by a man, but God will then uplift them. He'll take them out of the Kelipas, and then they will be from the holy source.
Yay.
Okay? It's not so exciting.
That's why
All right.
the Gentiles eat pig.
What do you mean?
They think that Jesus is Mashiach and he uplifted it.
Maybe? I never heard that before.
As
Okay.
soon as he uplifted shrimps, I will be.
Rabbi Isai, ladies and gentlemen, what's our main question here? Just like last time, right? So when we were talking about Kelipas Nogah, it was much simpler, right? It was like, you're talking about food and drink, you're talking about doing simple things, you didn't do it with the right intentions, so you want to do Teshuvah from it, so you just have to have remorse for it, right? And then you did a proper Teshuvah, and it also gets uplifted, right? What if somebody does something that's Shalosh Kelipas Atmeos? What if somebody does do something that's completely forbidden according to Torah? He does eat pork, let's say, right? Heavy stuff. However, there's hope, right? So, the only other way that these three Kelipas can be redeemed from their bondage, or I should say that these activities or these items can be redeemed from their bondage within the three Kelipas and uplifted to spirituality, to holiness, to godliness. So one way is Mashiach. The other way is when a person already did it, right? And Yosef Ilan, I think it was you that I was telling you that we're going to talk eventually about the concept called Ech Tava Asher, which means when someone says, I will sin and then I will do Teshuvah. God doesn't want this. However, once somebody sinned, there is a very, 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 very special door open for him. What does that mean? When Teshuvah is done, the Talmud tells us clearly, B'makom, in that place, Shebalei Teshuvah Omdin, where repenters, penitents, people who do Teshuvah, who do realize the importance of their actions and say that and regret what they did in the past and firmly accept that in the future they'll be proper Jews. Teshuvah, right? We don't need to talk about exactly what it is. It's the place where Baalei Teshuvah, where those people can reach. In other words, the spiritual level they can reach. Exactly. Even the most complete and the most righteous of men cannot reach that status. Why? Without getting into too much detail, there is a unique longing, a unique love of God that can be formed, that develops when someone is so distant from God. The more distant we feel from God, the closer we can become. Why? Because that love becomes much more passionate. Right? As an example. Right? We always talk about how distance makes the heart grow fonder. Right? So, any spouse of an officer in the Marines will tell you that it's the hardest thing in the world. Right? And they'll never recommend it to anybody. Don't let your husband, don't let your wife go into the Marines. Right? terrible. He's going to be away from you for years, and you'll never see him, right? It'll ruin your relationship, etc., right? Not advisable. It's not advisable to begin with to get distant from God. But when the husband comes home from the Marines, there's no question that the love or the passion that there is between the husband and the wife then, after so much separation, it brought about a longing. It brought about that distance brings out that vacuum. This is a constant physics as well. A vacuum automatically attracts things. Right? And the longer you sustain that vacuum, whatever it is, the stronger the force is that things should be attracted into that vacuum. Right? Mm-hmm. Similarly with Teshuvah. The further away from God we fall, the higher we have the ability to reach. It's also harder, because it's a high level, but that is why the Talmud tells us that in the place where penitents stand, even the perfectly righteous cannot stand. And this brings us to the last point to discuss, which is the power of bedtime Shema. Right? Yes,
question.
Go ahead.
Maybe it's stupid, but
It's definitely not stupid. Questions are never stupid.
why kosher issues are so severe? Like, let's say somebody really loved everybody and really a good person. Why it's judged like,
Why is kosher?
like it's murder or something?
Very good.
What's the big deal?
Great question. I am not going to promise a complete answer now because we're going to talk about it later. But the root of it, if you remember the class, were you here when we learned chapter 5 about the study of Torah and how important the study of Torah is?
Yes.
Right? What was so powerful about the study of Torah? That it became a part of you. That was a way to actually make godliness a part of you. Right? And the best example we were able to give for it in our physical lives was what? Remember? Eating. When you eat something, you digest it. But much more than digesting it, it becomes dam, according to the words of Tanya, right? This is also dam ubasar kipsaro. It becomes a part of who you are. Right? That's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's important that food be kosher.
No, I'm not saying
Now,
it's not important.
the question is,
Like
why is kosher food, who decides what kosher, what's not? That the Torah decides. Right? And you're saying on a spiritual level, why does God, right? So you understand why it's such a powerful thing, what we eat. Okay, so that discussion will be for a different time. Why kosher, on a certain level it's a chok, but there are spiritual significances to it.
But there is so much ruling and nonsense about it, so many
It's not nonsense, it's godly Torah, it's godly.
It's like, it becomes like the most important thing, which I think there are so many more important things for men.
Okay, so
But that's not what God thinks.
But you're touching on a different point. Different point, which is very important to understand, which is, and I love the analogy of a relationship for this, right? Imagine if a husband comes up to his wife one day, he says to her, "You'll never believe what I bought you. I bought you a Tesla." Oh my gosh, 20, 30, how expensive is it? $80,000, whatever they go for, right? It's very expensive. He's buying it for just as a gift. What? 100,000, 89.
No, they made the new one. It's a 30.
The lower one, okay, but the expensive one is what, 80, 90, $100,000. Got you a Tesla, right? And his wife looks at him and says, "Honey, let me ask you a question. Did you take out the garbage?" He says, "No, I didn't take out the garbage." And he looks at her like, "What are you on about? I just bought you a Tesla. We're talking about 100 grand here on the table. We're talking about hours and hours of my life that I worked to the blood, sweat, and tears to earn that money, and I put it in all for you. I love you." She looks at me and she says, "Sweetie, I don't have a license. I don't want all the cars in the world. I don't want. I asked you for a simple thing, take out the garbage. You love me, do what I want, not what you want. I know you want a Tesla. For you, a Tesla would be the most beautiful thing in the world, but I don't have a license. I have no need for a Tesla." Right? So, this doesn't mean that mitzvahs don't have reasoning. Mitzvahs do have reasons, right? And there is importance, and there's meaning, and there's spiritual understanding behind mitzvahs. Right? But if we want to forge a relationship with God, loving the whole world and doing everything in the world, things that we think are beautiful for the world, it's very nice that we're doing those things, but if God doesn't want those things, if not, God asked us to do this. And maybe, right? Just like sometimes with the husband, I know my wife does this to me, I don't know about anybody else, right? Maybe the reason why God is asking us to do this is because He knows that's our struggle. And He wants to see, no, do it for me where it's hard for you. It's not hard for you to buy me a Tesla. You're a millionaire anyways. Right? For you to buy me a Tesla, it's like, you can buy off my love. Do something for me where it's hard for you. Do something for me where you can, where you take your desire, right? Do something for me, but I know it's hard for you. Right? God tells us, I'm going to put you in a position where it's going to be it's the most ridiculous thing in the world. You'll tell me, I'll give tzedakah. I'll give everybody in the world tzedakah. It says, no problem. Tzedakah is a mitzvah of the Torah. It's very nice you give tzedakah, but I want you to keep kosher. Now, there is a spiritual significance to it. I'm beating around that because I don't want to get into that discussion because it's very technical. The spiritual significance behind kosher, just like there's the spiritual significance behind Shabbos, there's a spiritual significance behind tefillin. And we could talk about why God does, in fact, want those things, right? But much more important is for us to realize that because those are the things that quote unquote bother, right, God, those are the things where God wants to see the relationship with us. Right? We spoke about the power, the unbelievable, unlimited godly potential that there is in a mitzvah. Why? Because when we do a mitzvah, what do we say? What do we say? I'm putting myself aside. Right? We spoke about how everything is either ego-driven or godly-driven. Why? Why is when something's not ego-driven, automatically it's godly-driven? Why? Because the moment that it's not about you, that's where godliness resides. That's where it's God-infused. Why? Because now you manage to get beyond yourself and do something beyond you. For God, because God wants it. Right? I didn't answer your question because we didn't get to the spiritual significance behind kosher, but at least a little bit more insight on it, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we get to the special power behind bedtime Shema. Okay?
Can you read us bedtime Shema, please?
Can I read you bedtime Shema? No, I'm sorry. It's in the Siddur. I'm happy to show you where it is. I cannot read it for you. You have to read it. I'm happy to show you. That's not a bad idea. Let's make this a little bit practical. We'll take out a Siddur. I'll show you guys where it is. The bedtime Shema, a little bit of myth busting here. So it's on page... Sorry, a second. Here we go. It's on page 141 in your Siddur, if you'd like to find it, when you'd like to find it, right? And it's actually a very long meditation. The crux of which is the mitzvah of Shema, proclaiming God's oneness before we go to sleep. And it should be the last thing that we do before we go to bed. So if you have one of these at home, if this is one you have at home, page 141. So the crux of it is the proclamation of God as one. But up until then, you'll notice there's all these prayers that we say. It's like a meditation. It's really inspiring, actually. You know, Master of the universe, I hereby forgive anyone who has angered or vexed me or sinned. It's like if you actually do this is a lot of work, by the way. My father-in-law, my grandfather-in-law. So Chani Hanoka's father, famous chassid. My father-in-law has stories of watching him say Shema, say the bedtime Shema, and it took him hours and hours. Mm-hmm. He'd wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and he was still saying it. Mm-hmm. Because bedtime Shema done properly is what we call cheshbon hanefesh. It's really an accounting of your soul. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't advise that every night it should take you that long. You should work on yourself one step at a time. Right? But it is a very healthy thing to do that. At the end of our day, a recounting of our day. Think about how our day went and you know, get through it. Make sure we forgive anybody we may have angered. Or if anybody angered us, we forgive them. Right? Meaning, we ask for forgiveness from anybody we may have angered. Right? And we forgive anybody that may have angered us. Okay. So why are we talking about it here? Because we just said that anything that's forbidden by Torah it's locked up. Right? To get out of that is like a huge deal. There's an exception. Random little avera, a random little prohibition, which is in Hebrew it's called shichrat zera levatala, which means when a person emits drops of semen wastefully. In other words, not with relations. And it's interesting. In this portion of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe talks about it. So it's a prohibition against Torah to release semen unless it's during intimate relations. And it's interesting that here in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe mentions that this is very different than if someone has intimate relations with someone that they're not supposed to. Right? So a brother and sister, right? There's a whole list of different people. But let's talk about brother and sister friends, right? For brother and sister to have relations, that's way worse than releasing semen wastefully. Even though they're both not allowed. Why is that? Because despite the fact that these drops of semen were released wastefully, nothing actually physically bad came about in the world from it. Right? When a person has intimate relations with someone else, it's possible that a child is formed, When a child is formed, then there's an actual physical manifestation of the negative act that they did. Okay, fine, but without getting into all the different details of it, right? So the Alter Rebbe says that despite the fact that this act technically falls under forbidden pleasures, it can still be redeemed by thorough and proper remorse and meditation during the bedtime Shema. What is so powerful about the prayer of the bedtime Shema? So we spoke about it a little bit already, but just to talk about it a little bit more. To quote on the bottom of page 100, the Gemara says, the Talmud says, in the bold, all the way at the bottom, if one recites the Shema at bedtime, it is as if he held a double-edged sword. In other words, you destroy Kelipas' grasp over this particular object. Right? And so the next time you're about to go to bed and you fall asleep watching a movie or something,
Then you have to wake up and do the Shema.
Exactly. Think about the power of what can be if you wake up and you do the Shema and you actually say these words and you meditate over what's going on over here and you take a moment to actually you actually regret doing something negative in that day. There's a lot of power there.
Is that the case to say in English?
Sure. Whatever language you're more comfortable in. If you do know Hebrew, the Shema itself should be said in Hebrew, which is the word Shema Yisrael and the following paragraph.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right. And with this we conclude. I know we got a little practical at the end of this lesson, huh? With this we conclude Chapter 7, Negative Energy of Jewish Mysticism, Lessons in Tanya.
All right.
Very nice.
Thank you.